All right. Welcome, everybody, to this episode 99 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, CEO and partner here at Thoughtium, and we are so thrilled to be here with you all on a week-by-week basis every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock Central. This is episode 99. We've been talking about this inflection point or this culmination of episode 100 for a handful of weeks now. And we're just so thrilled to continue to bring you great content every week. And we're extremely excited about our 99th episode here at Navigating Now. As you all know, Navigating Now is an opportunity for us to put business leaders at the center of discussions that matter most to us in business and life. We have had so many great discussions over the course of the last near 100 episodes about leadership, about how we exist in work and life, and how the lines between work and life are blurring so drastically. And that has brought a new discussion around the authenticity that it takes to lead within organizations and, more importantly, lead within your community. We want to thank everybody who has joined us today and who might be watching this in the future. You are all part of an absolutely coveted community of ours. We continue to want to pour into the dialogue, the conversation, the connections that you all are having as part of the Navigating Now network. And we have, 100 episodes, nearly 100 episodes. We have more than 60 guests who have been on this show. And the connections, the dialogue, the community is growing so organically and so beautifully. And we want to thank everybody for being a part of that. We stream live every week to LinkedIn, to YouTube, and to Facebook. And we want to particularly thank our LinkedIn community. We're so fortunate to be a part of the LinkedIn beta network that is allowed to go live to LinkedIn every week. And we just love those folks who stop by as they're scrolling through their LinkedIn feed, or maybe watch this in their feed after we have gone live. And we get so many great comments about folks who know our guests that are on the show, or maybe know a thing or two about the topics. Today's topic on episode 99 is one that is a big part of what we do here at Thoughtium. It's also a big part of a more recent discussion that we've been having around whole leadership coaching and development. And we do a lot of learning and leadership development with executives, leaders, and employees at all different levels of the organization here at Thoughtium. We love to grow and develop people and leaders. And a part of that is maintaining an incredible network of coaches and leaders that can bring new services and new angles and new discussions, new tools to our leaders in some incredible ways. And today we have none other than Michelle Thomas, the principal and founder of Michelle Thomas and Associates, at the table with us. Michelle is going to bring us into the changing role of today's coach. And we just absolutely love Michelle's approach. One, because she's been a big part of the Thoughtium community. She's also been a part of the Thoughtium team. She's now a preferred provider. And we do a lot of just interesting work with Michelle in really extending our leadership capabilities. And today we're going to be talking about the changing role of today's coach. And so I want to bring to the table Michelle Thomas, again, the principal and founder at Michelle Thomas and Associates. Michelle, we are so excited to have you. Welcome to the virtual roundtable for your first time.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I am thrilled and honored to be standing on the edge of 100 episodes with you. So thank you for inviting me in for number 99.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking before the show. I couldn't believe you hadn't been on this show because, we are in constant communication and collaboration with you. And it's been just a wonderful partnership. And at the center of that partnership is, our mutual passion for growing and developing leaders, and doing it on a platform of authenticity and encouraging that authenticity in the coaching dialogues and the coaching tools that we bring to our clients. And we know that you not only share that methodology, but that's been a part of your methodology for many, many years. And we're just excited to unpack that today here with you. So again, appreciate you being on the show. Why don't we start with a little bit about who you are, but I'm going to ask you a question that we love to ask all of our guests as they join the show. Michelle, tell us a little bit about you and your work, but I want you to start with what's one of the earliest memories that you had growing up that you might think back and say, wow, that's a memory that I would tie to my passion for coaching? Or that's maybe one of the first
Mhm.
expressions of how I've been able to lead others or establish these wonderful, relationships with. What's one of your earliest memories of being a coach, whether that's formally or informally? And then tell us a little bit about you and Michelle Thomas and Associates.
No, so thank you for that. And I'm actually realizing that I don't have to go that far back to pull up a memory, because it was literally my own professional midlife crisis, if you will, that occurred about
Mm.
15 years ago that really triggered me to hire a coach to help me to kind of sort through this inflection point that I found myself at as a emerging leader and rising leader inside of an organization. And that experience was so transformative for me. And it really caused me to take a big step back and reappraise so many facets of my life, that I came to this hypothesis: I cannot be the only senior leader inside this organization that's finding themselves at that kind of an inflection point.
Mm.
And it was at that point that I thought, wow, I think there's an unmet need inside this company, and an opportunity really to provide customized coaching for leaders who find themselves at those inflection points. So that's really was my initial catalyst into coaching.
Yeah, I love that. And so tell us, what type of coaching are you doing today?
Thank you. Yes, I'm doing a lot of leadership coaching and a lot of executive coaching. So most of my clients are people that are either at the officer level or perhaps rising from a director level into an
Mhm.
officer level position. So I do a lot of it one-on-one executive coaching with that population. And then one of my favorite things to do, honestly, is to work with cohorts of leaders. So
Mm.
a big part of my practice is bringing leaders together who may or may not interact with each other inside the same organization, and provide a leadership development experience for them that they can, where their own personal development and growth starts to unfold, but they have a wonderful opportunity to begin to build much needed community with their fellow leaders.
Yeah. You talk a little bit about your personal journey to becoming a coach, and that's one aspect or one part of the journey that I feel is so consistent with so many great coaches, is that they went through the process themselves. They went through the work themselves, and they had a couple of like real big inflection points in their career where they either had to develop new skills or they were really supported by great coaches and mentors. I think of Kevin Adler, another great coach that
Mhm.
you've brought to the Navigating Now community, and his story is rooted in these kind of breakthroughs, and these inflection points in your personal life, and then bringing that to your coaching style and even your methodology. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a coach. It sounds like it started with you kind of personally walking the path as an emerging leader, but you decide, okay, I want to be a coach. Tell us a little bit about that journey, both formally, what type of training did you get, and informally, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I jumped into the training full steam. I just jumped in head first, and so I received my first certification through the Coaches Training Institute, so CTI,
Mm.
which is really rooted in a very coactive approach to coaching. So it acknowledges that there's not a hierarchy in the coach client relationship, but that we are two peers collaborating and co-creating an outcome for that particular person who's being coached. So I jumped into that coaching process, and I think it was probably about 6 or 7 months of actual hands-on training, and then another 6 months or so to go through the whole certification process to receive my credentials.
Mm-hmm. And were there other like organizations, societies, accreditations that you were looking at, and why did you choose CTI?
Thank you. Yeah, so I did look at some other ones. So there was IPEC, was another one that I remember looking at the time. But really, it was coming back to the coach that I had worked with,
Mm-hmm.
and the transformative nature of that experience with her that drew me right into CTI's program, because that's where she had
Yeah.
received her certification.
Yeah. I want to ask because we talk to a lot of leaders that have had very successful careers. They have a real knack for building teams, supporting people, and they might have a little bit of a desire or like an inkling that they might want to get into coaching, particularly later on in their career.
Mhm.
Um, but I find in those conversations, it's in the kind of discovery phase where maybe the doubt is at its highest, where like that imposter syndrome might be at its highest. Like, yes, I've led teams, I've built and scaled teams, but like I could never go and be a coach. I mean, I've been the product of coaching my entire life. Like coaches have some sort of like magic voodoo that I don't have, right? I've been very successful, but I'm not a coach. And did you feel a little bit of that? Like what were some of the kind of shame gremlins that you had to deal with in the first parts of deciding that you want to be a coach, or maybe you didn't?
I honestly, and I am the queen of gremlins, my own gremlins and saboteurs. So make no mistake, I've got a whole army of them that I'm constantly managing. But that was not one of them. And I would say, Anthony, one of the things I have discovered is that because I've been in the front lines of client leadership roles, the combination of my experience and the challenges that I faced as a leader inside of an organization, when I couple that with the coaching methodologies and approaches, that it somehow creates some credibility and some and trust is built pretty quickly when I work with my clients. Yeah. So that was something that I really felt strongly, that the integration of my frontline leadership experience with the coaching tools was going to be really effective for me as a coach.
If you were talking to somebody who maybe didn't have that frontline experience, is that something that you'd ask people to really consider? Because, from my opinion, I mean, even as someone who has received great coaching, one of the first things I like to know about a coach is, what roles they've played and what experience they have. But I do know there are potentially younger coaches out there that might be interested in coaching. And I can also say, we know that there's a whole plethora of folks that get into coaching, right, and maybe don't have that experience, and they might get in a little bit too prematurely, or maybe they haven't really thought thoroughly through like what particular skills they would bring to a coaching relationship. Yeah. What would be your advice? What would your advice be for someone who hasn't held a leadership position for 10 plus years and really walked that path as a leader themselves?
I think I would come back to trusting the foundations of coaching, right? So a lot of when you go through that certification process and you go through that whole education process, we are taught that we don't need to be subject matter experts in our clients' businesses, which is absolutely true. Like our job as a coach is to help the leaders that we're working with dig within themselves and discover within themselves the resources that they need to create the business outcomes they're trying to create. So at the end of the day, it's really about trusting the coaching process more than it is being feeling concerns that you somehow are lacking some of the professional development or professional frontline leadership experiences that maybe other coaches have. I think what I have found in my practice is that I blur the lines in the way I work between and bring a lot of mentorship and combine it with coaching methodologies in my client work, but it isn't necessary.
I love that advice. Coaching is a process. There are real fundamentals that you have to rely on. And oftentimes that process and those fundamentals create very specific containers where you and your coachee can exist. Whereas if you relied solely on your experience or even the interpersonal connection that you might have with your coachee, that space isn't clear enough for real growth and development. So it's this, to me, it is this, the magic is in the combination of your ability to call on your experience, connect, and as well guide the discussion with real process that and spaces that allow your coachees to come forward and do some of the work themselves. Would you say, though, that that's maybe the two sides of the spectrum?
No, it's absolutely true. And what's coming up for me as I listen to you is how hard I have to work with self-managing the former business leader side of my brain, right? And so I always have to kind of figure out like, okay, we grow up as leaders and we're taught to be very directive in our communication style. And that's not what coaching is. And so I'm constantly managing my own like vocabulary and the language that I'm using, making sure that I'm not being super directive in my style, or I'm very pointed when I'm making a transition, when I'm kind of stepping out of a coaching conversation and I'm shifting into one that's where I'm going to stand next to you as also a former business leader. I name that when I'm making that transition, so they're aware that I'm shifting.
Ooh, I love that. I think that's great because I'm laughing because in the coaching relationships that I have, I do find myself so many times struggling, not wanting to or wanting to provide as much of that anecdotal examples of kind of where I've faced this. And again, that's when you start to get into a little bit more of this like professorial, you're kind of like on the stage, if you will. And that then puts you in a position where you almost have to have the answers. And you never want to be in a coaching relationship where there's an expectation that you have the answers and that they're there to kind of consume. And it's easy to go there. Like it's really easy to go there. I think the more that we call on our personal experience, the more we can come across as coaches like we have all the answers. And that to me stunts the growth of the coachee-coach relationship.
It does. And in fact, I often, when I'm establishing what coaching is with a leader that I'm working with, I usually draw comparisons between what a consultant does, what a coach does, and what a therapist does. And where the lines get really, really blurry is, well, it gets blurry on all three, but I have to be very clear on what makes one different from the other so that the leader that I'm working with understands what this is going to look like, how conversations are going to unfold. And then I'm usually pretty quick to acknowledge, and I blur the lines over here. I don't blur the lines between therapy and coaching, but I do blur the lines between mentorship and consulting and coaching.
I love that. Humor us a little bit. Like let's chat about, the differences between consulting, coaching, and therapy, because we all have our own definitions, but I think helping, defining these might help our audience understand where the gray areas might exist.
Yeah, no, I love the question, and I love explaining it to people because the way I like to think, the way I talk about a consultant is actually a subject matter expert. We bring them in to help us solve a very specific business problem, whether it's a process or an approach. We bring them in to kind of diagnose what the problem is and tell us what the solution is. When I step into a coaching relationship, the way I think about it is that the subject matter is actually the leader themselves. And there's no possible way I could be a subject matter expert in who that person is, what they want, and how they're going to go about getting it. So to me, that's more kind of the business consulting side of it. Therapy is very different from coaching because therapy will spend a lot of time looking over your shoulder, kind of digging into your past, digging into your histories, your stories, and helping you paint a picture of how those stories and those experiences shaped the person you are today. Coaching begins with where you are today and where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I'll give maybe even some more specific examples, and many of us coaches might relate to this. If you are in a relationship with your coachee where you feel like every session that you have concludes with you having to deliver something to your coachee, you're consulting. And I think as a consultant and a coach, that is a bit of a difficult balance as well too, because my coaching style is oftentimes a little bit of the mindset, the skill set, but also a little bit of the tool set. So I do have a propensity to love to bring frameworks and tools and things forward that they can leverage and use in between sessions. But you very quickly can get into a space where you're facilitating almost like content development, or you're facilitating a process with a coachee that ends in some sort of output. And ultimately, coaching needs to be more of a relationship. Coaching starts with really great dialogue. And of course, there's some things that I want you to leave with and think about and come back with, but it does not need to be necessarily an exchange of information or the production of new content, if you will. And if you find yourself in that place, you might be more consulting than you are coaching.
Absolutely. To me, like when I think about, I do bring constructs and tools and frameworks into my coaching. They're often don't belong to me. They're often things I've picked up along the way, either through my training or my education. And I will offer up a framework or a tool of some kind if I think it's going to enable and further or accelerate whatever their goal happens to be. But I don't come to the table. Typically, I try to avoid coming to the table with a set process or a set of solutions and a set way of thinking, but sit more in a space of curiosity and just kind of allow these sessions to unfold and see where they go.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. We are here with Michelle Thomas, the founder of Michelle Thomas and Associates. Michelle is a coach and a leader in several communities here in the Chicagoland area and beyond. We're talking today about the changing role of today's coach. And so we've been unpacking a little bit about, what is coaching and what's the process to becoming a coach, and maybe some differences between coaching and consulting and even therapy. I want to talk about, Michelle, how coaching has changed over the course of the last few years, because the big dialogue here at Navigating Now has been how our workplace has been shifting and the people within it have been evolving at such a rapid pace. How has this impacted, our roles as coaches over the course of the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like what has significantly accelerated is the need to really kind of embrace that leader that's coming to the table for coaching as a whole person. I think typically in the past, when we talk about leadership coaching or executive coaching, we're really talking about how do we accelerate business performance or business outcomes. What I'm finding is that the leaders want to be acknowledged for whole people, like fully integrated and whole people. And so what I'm finding is that my offer to coach the whole person when someone steps into a coaching engagement with me, even if it's called leadership coaching or executive coaching, they're more willing to take me up on bringing their whole selves to the coaching experience. So that to me, is what I've seen really accelerate, particularly over the course of the last 2 to 2.5 years. I think the pandemic really kind of brought that to the forefront.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Whole self coaching or holistic coaching has become more there's more of a market for it. And as our personal lives and professional lives are blending so drastically, I think so has this opportunity for a new style of coaching has shown up, where leaders themselves are more open to different dimensions of development. And, that's all the way from, their own sense of awareness, self-awareness and EQ, deeper, tapping into deeper levels of their leadership in terms of how they're supporting others, because day in and day out, leaders, especially at the top of organizations, are having to deal with real personal scenarios and situations with their people in ways that they never have before. And we no longer can kind of, hide behind the standard governance structure within a large organization. A Zoom screen is coming on and we're having to deal with people issues without any context or any prep. And that's almost the world that we're used to. And so it's requiring these almost new skills of a leader to understand how to stay open themselves, how to stay curious, how to invite that type of authentic dialogue in. And oftentimes that means a deeper level of their own personal work. And that's something that, I think well before the pandemic, Michelle, that's a style of coaching that you've brought to a lot of our clients here at Thought Team. And I know that you have in your, second, third, fourth degree network. And it feels like it's like the moment for that type of coaching today more than it ever has been.
Yeah. I mean, because I think was it always at the forefront, or was it just something that needed to be like we needed to shine a light on, right? Because I nothing about my belief that there are things that happen inside our personal lives that can be happening in our personal lives that may be having unintended impacts on the way we show up as a leader, or things going on in our roles as leaders that are having unintended impacts on the way we show up at home and in our personal lives. For me, none of that has changed, but the Zoom screen has made it visible to all of us now, right? And so to me now, the conversation, it's like even more than ever before, we need to be having that type of conversation with leaders.
Yeah. I'm curious as well, this is something that we're talking about a lot in terms of, when we design these leadership development programs, or we're putting together a training program or some sort of learning and development program, what we're realizing is that another big factor here in the design of leadership development, learning development, any type of kind of human capital development, is that people today have more access to content that they can self-pace that allows them to get into the theory and the concepts in much more of a robust and deeper way for free than they ever have before. And what we're finding is that presents itself with a few opportunities and even a few challenges. The challenges being that we have so much information at our fingertips about emotional intelligence and EQ and situational intelligence and authenticity and vulnerability. There are books and YouTube videos and podcasts. You could go so deep in that learning. The challenge is, what do we do with it, and how do we synthesize it and apply it specifically in our role, which I think can be the role of today's coach, is almost to facilitate the wonderful self-paced learning that's happening at every level of the organization. We can almost curate some of that content in a way that we couldn't 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think another opportunity for us as coaches is that we can become more specialized. So, 20 years ago, coaching was maybe not limited to, but a large part of coaching was really what they called executive coaching. And I rarely use that term anymore because it's just so broad. Coaching styles and coaches themselves have become far more specialized, hitting at very specific dimensions of a leader. You have transition coaching, you have communication effectiveness coaching, you have holistic coaching now. And I'm curious, how are you starting to see the way that, you either package up your coaching offerings, or that kind of balance between really coming forward as a specialized coach, but also staying open to supporting, different types of leaders, if you will?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So I think one of the things I have done is I just don't use the word coach. I talk about like leadership development and helping organizations and individual leaders in whatever their leadership development, leadership growth goals and objectives are. So I've actually stripped the word coach largely out of the way I talk about what it is I do, because I don't want to be put in that box that you just described, that this is the only thing I do and it's the only way I can step in and support organizations. So I've actually pulled that language out of my vernacular and focus on outcomes that we're trying to create, either for groups of leaders or for teams or for individual leaders. How I go about doing it, then it opens up, right? Lots of ways for me to kind of go about supporting leaders and creating those outcomes.
Yeah. If you had to look up and out, let's call it 10 years from today, which I know that time horizon is a little bit more difficult with how quickly things have been moving, but
Anthony, I'll be retired.
You will be retired, but hopefully there will still be a really great marketplace for leadership development, mentorship, coaching. Where do you see this heading? And are there aspects of your work that you see, evolving, or maybe aspects that you see never changing?
I think, let me think about that for a moment. I think the biggest thing I see happening is organizations embracing the value of bringing leaders together in cohorts to create leadership experiences. Like, that's the thing, as I think about the composition of the work that I do and the portfolio of work that I do, it is beginning to tip dramatically into bringing cohorts of leaders together to create an experience for them, and perhaps even put a business problem for the organization at the front and center of that conversation, and have them collaborate around creating those kinds of solutions. So for me, what I'm seeing is a coaching more broadly, maybe shifting more into these cohort approaches versus one leader at a time.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that as well, and I know we've worked in collaboration supporting a few of these cohorts. The Thought Team Accelerator platform is a great example where we've just seen both intact groups of leaders and also mixed groups of leaders, even across multiple industries, coming together. And there's a real power in that peer coaching environment where you now, as the coach or the leader of that cohort, your sole focus is really on facilitating that peer-to-peer discussion that is so fruitful, and it's so rooted in like real world examples that maybe we don't even have as coaches. And your job is to really help folks distill and connect. And there is another layer of vulnerability that we see when you can develop the right cohort, right? For example, we were talking before the show about how particularly founders of startup organizations, when you put 5 or 6 founders in a room, the conversation gets so real so quick. And oftentimes, within 5 or 10 minutes of a real discussion about, the ups and downs of running a business and being a founder, it gets almost emotional because you realize that there's just this real power in kind of putting your armor down in front of others who are in the same arena. And you glom onto that as a leader. And I think in this kind of group model that you're speaking to, we as coaches are able to tap into that goodness without having to be that space ourselves, if you will.
I agree. And I think, let's be honest, leadership is lonely, right? As you continue to kind of move up the ranks, you're the built-in network and the built-in community that you have starts to become, it's not built in anymore, right? You have to kind of consciously create it for yourself. And I think that over the course of the last 2 years, with people working in either a hybrid format or completely remote, that has made the community building that leaders are yearning for even harder to build. And so that's why I think these cohort programs have been incredibly powerful ways to bring leaders together. It kind of pulls them out of isolation, because I know a lot of them feel very isolated right now. And it allows them to not only maybe normalize some of the discomfort that they've been feeling over the last 2 years, but also tap into the collective wisdom of other leaders who are also kind of in the front lines of navigating their businesses.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So many great insights. Gosh, we've covered so much even in just a short period of time. Michelle, thank you so much for your insights. Before we leave, we want to do a quick lightning round, and this is to get to know Michelle Thomas a little bit better. We just love our Navigating Now community, so we want to bring a little bit of fun here towards the end and ask you a couple of questions. Are you game?
I think so. Okay. Be kind. Be kind.
I'll try. So tell us what you're reading, listening to, or watching right now that you're super pumped about.
Oh, I am reading. Oh my gosh, I just forgot the name of the book. Oh my gosh, I just forgot the name of the book.
That always happens.
Oh, it's a Glennon Doyle book. I'm reading the Glennon Doyle book that is really powerful, and it's been a very exciting book for me to be reading. But it's really powerful about her kind of going through her own kind of personal transformation. So that's the book that's been on the nightstand right now.
Are you guys watching any shows? Like, what shows are you into right now?
We have not been watching a lot of television.
Good for you.
Really, really and truly. We moved. I mentioned to you before the show, we moved last month, and we've been so busy with various projects around this house that we're not watching a lot of TV right now. We're spending a lot of time outside in our new backyard. Yeah.
Well, spoiler alert, there's nothing on TV. So.
Well, and that I think is the other part. There's kind of a lot of garbage on TV right
now. Yeah. I recently have found myself diving into a little bit more reading, a little bit more listening. It's funny when you decide to unplug for a couple of, let's call it, months of consistent TV watching, you realize you're really not missing anything. Same thing with social media.
Yeah. I feel like my brain starts to atrophy. And kind of turning off the screens lately has been really cathartic.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us, if you are, assuming most days you're working from home and you're in your new home office, hopefully, and you hopefully have a window that is within view. Middle of the day, you want to take a little bit of a mental break and take your mind off of work, and you start to gaze out the window. What are you thinking about?
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about just the value of space and spaciousness. So as I look out my window today, I live in a much less urban environment than I left. Yes. And so what I'm kind of thinking about is the spaciousness that's in front of me and all the opportunity that's in front of me.
Oh, I love that. It's interesting. I was just telling somebody this the other day about how I live in the city of Chicago as well too. So my ability to gaze is limited, and I'm realizing that gazing, like long distance gazing, is one of my favorite things to do after a long day. And I thankfully live in an apartment that gives me this like almost like small window of like this western view that goes beyond the city and out. And I find myself, whenever I have an opportunity, just like finding that window and just gazing out. There's something about, I think, space that has changed for us over the last few years. And, I personally have benefited from my world physically getting a lot smaller. But I've also realized on the other end of that, when I have an opportunity to acknowledge just how vast our world is, or even our community, it's eye-opening. It really is. And
Yes.
congratulations on creating that space for yourself. That's incredible.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I have lived in a largely urban environment most of my life, from
Yeah.
birth. And so to move out to a more rural space where we've got so much more elbow room and we can breathe
Mhm.
has been just transformative for me, and has been transformative for my family.
If you could travel to the past or the future, you had one choice, what would it be and what would you do?
Oh my gosh, I would absolutely travel to the future. No question.
Ooh.
Um, what would I do? I
I
don't.
love that
That
the
like
answer was
just
just,
the minute you say future, that talk about this space conversation, right? Like I'm looking
yeah.
out my window, I've got this huge, wonderful space ahead of me, and then I think about traveling to the future, and I almost get overwhelmed by what that could look like. But I would definitely
Oh,
go to
that's
the
so
future.
cool. We've never had somebody so emphatically say future, and equally not know what they would do. I love that response.
No, I mean, well, I mean, I'm a coach. We're always about looking forward,
Yeah.
right? With a deep
Hmm.
sense of curiosity and no agenda. So
Yeah.
I would head into the future with curiosity and without an agenda of what I wanted to do.
I love that. Okay. Most folks struggle with this last one, but I know you're going to do so wonderfully with it, because this is, I think, what you do with your folks and your community and your coachees all the time. Think of something that you admire about yourself, Michelle, and complete this sentence. If
Hmm.
the world were a lot more like me, it would be what?
Compassionate.
Mm,
If the world were a lot more like me, it would be a lot more compassionate.
yeah. I love that. I don't even need to clarify that, because that's the way that you've shown up for myself and the team here at Thoughtium. And I feel like we really only get shades of
Mhm.
just your brilliance and the work that you do. But when you do, show up in that collaboration, there's just a real sense of calm and compassion when we get to work with you. And that is such a good starting point for any relationship, whether it's a coaching relationship or not. And I just want to thank you for the way that you show up and the way that you have shown up for us over the course of the last several years.
Thank you. And I want you to know how
Yeah.
much I deeply appreciate this partnership.
Of course, of course. Michelle, thank you so much. Welcome officially to the Navigating Now community, even though you've been a part of the community for years. This is just a great place for you to be. And also thank you for bringing a handful of incredible guests to our show. How can people find you if they're interested in learning more or potentially reaching out?
You can reach me at my email address, michelle@mthomasandassociates.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm sure this is not the last time that you'll be on the show. Just really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Okay, so we wrap things up here with episode 99 with Michelle Thomas. Oh, I just love discussions about how we are showing up for people, and whether that's in a formal coaching relationship or even just day-to-day leadership. I hope you all got something from this conversation. I know I absolutely did, and that's really the point of this show week over week, is to provide that 1 or 2% improvement in the way that we lead and the way that we show up for our teams and our organizations. With that being said, we are so excited about episode 100. And that is going to be next week, Thursday at 3:00 Central. And gosh, I almost, I get goosebumps even looking at this graphic, because this shows the many faces of Navigating Now that have not only been a part of our network and a part of the show, but that have shown up for each other week over week. And we've had so many wonderful leaders, a part of this community, a part of this show, and a part of the collective dialogue that we're able to share with you. And next week, Thursday, we're going to be celebrating that. So we will have a handful of these leaders show up to the table and say hello. And we're going to do it in a little bit of a rapid fashion. But next week is all about celebrating 100 episodes of Navigating Now. And I want to thank you all for being such a big part of that week after week. We so encourage you to tune in next week, Thursday at 3 o'clock. We can't wait to see you for yet another 100 episodes. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon and a great week.